Hey there, Emily Mills here from Sketch Academy, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my Europe sketch travel journal with you. I'm going to be flipping through the pages and showing you how I started and where I ended up and talking about my process, and then also talking about tools. So before I get into it, I know the biggest question is always, what are the tools that you're using? Well, this is a Handbook Journal Co. 5x5 square sketchbook. It's got a green canvas. They come in different colors. They're about $13 US. And they have 128 GSM paper, which is about 86 pounds for Americans. So it's kind of like a thick cardstock. Now, I found this paper to be pretty good when it comes to bleed through. You can kind of see each page through on the white. So maybe not on the video, but when you're looking at it in person, I can kind of see some shadowing, like the pages coming through the white areas. But overall, I think this is a great journal. I love it so much. It's been really good to me, and it's been working well with the writing tools that I have. So the writing tools that I used in this journal, the first was a Unipen fine line brush pen. You can see it's like a felt tip point pen. And it says water and fade proof pigment ink. Now in my testing, I did not find it to be fade proof, and it wasn't really waterproof. If I go over this line with a yellow marker, it will smudge. So it's not quite as fast as they say it is, but it's still a really great pen, and I love the pen tip itself. I also use these U brand felt tip pens. This is basically like a fat micron. This is very light fast or waterproof. So if I go over this pen with a yellow marker, no bleeding whatsoever. Love these. You can get them at Target. And lastly, I just brought a Tombow gray brush pen with me. I only used the brush pen tip, and I personally brought N75, and I think I brought a 65 with me as well. That's the color. And I pretty much just use gray, black in this journal. I thought about adding color, but I just decided not to because I like it so much and it would add a ton of extra work. So I chose to use this really minimal tool palette because we did backpacks and we just had to travel super light and I couldn't bring anything extra. And you can always add color. So that's kind of my logic of how I started. So starting off, I just kind of created this title page because I was really excited for my trip. And I also put in my information in the front cover just in case I lost it. I was just hoping someone would maybe give it back to me if they did find it. So that's up to you. I started my journal before we left when we started doing errands and packing and travel, just research. I started my journal with that instead of the trip itself. So this is why there's color, because I was still at home. And I was using these zebra mild liners. I actually was using a brush nib, kind of like a Tombow, but they do have the other marker nib as well. And I really love the mild liners for color, but that's why you see color in the beginning and not anywhere else in the journal. So the first full spread of the journal starts when we were actually traveling, like getting on the plane and being in the airport and all of that. This is my traditional sketchnoting style. I just kind of figured, okay, I'm going to put the date up in the left corner and then just have little blurbs with pictures and text and dotted lines kind of connecting all of the timeline together. And then I just do gray lines in between the white space just to help it pop off the page a little bit better. Use the gray for shadowing. My photos, or not my photos, my images were really simple. That's my illustration style. And also I was doing this like in the airport and on the airplane and in between going places when we were taking breaks. So I didn't want my illustrations to be super complicated while I was actually traveling. And next, it's kind of the same thing. I just do all caps text and my traditional sketchnote style where I kind of write everything and then do dotted lines to connect the flow of events. Same here. And then here I was using my gray marker to create boxes because I was starting to feel like I wasn't actually happy with my spreads. I like them, but I also felt like I was kind of doing old habits, and I wanted to try something new in this travel journal. So you're going to start to see some changes soon because you'll notice that I'm just getting a little, I just felt like my spreads were a little boring. In these first two spreads, everything kind of felt the same. All the text is the same size, and that's kind of a bad habit of mine, is all the text is the same size. So here, Chimac, the restaurant name, I tried to make it really big and trying to start to do those boxes to make the text stand out a little bit. Here I'm like, okay, I need to actually start doing text that's a little bit more interesting because I don't want to just write the information to write it down. I want this to be a creative exercise as well. So like over here, this is a wood pigeon, so I made the word wood look like little sticks with a little leaf coming off of it, and I'm starting to like jump into creativity more. And here we go. Now I'm actually starting to get more comfortable with different size texts. And then after this spread, I felt like, you know, I want to make some really big stuff. So you'll see that I wanted the Guinness tour. I wanted a full illustration of the beer to kind of like give it the appreciation it deserved. And then same with this church. It was just so beautiful that I really wanted to dedicate a whole page to the illustration of it. So with sketchnoting, typically you don't want your illustrations to be super complex, but I'm also an illustrator by trade, and so I kind of break my own rules sometimes and will do more complex illustrations of things that I think I really want to remember. When I'm just documenting the day-to-day, I'm going to be doing these simple little icons and drawings, but for some things, I'm going to stop and do, this probably took, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 minutes because it was so detailed, and I did this at the end of the day, so yeah, and then St. Patrick's Cathedral, it's a little bit more detailed, but it's also way less detailed than this church is over here. So, but I'm still dedicating bigger chunks of the page to the things that I wanted to spend more time on. Here I started to actually find some rhythm and consistency. I started doing this shadow box on all of my dates and titles for each day. And here we go. I'm using those full pages more, really trying to embrace different styles of text and be more creative in my text treatments. And then I started this series on birds. So if you don't know me very well or you don't follow me on social media, you probably don't know that I'm really into birds and bird watching and birding. So every time I saw a new bird or I would just write it down, and then at the end of the day, I would have like here's all the birds that I saw this day. So this was the birds that we saw in Hoth, and this was just a really cool way for me to bring in my own hobby with sketchnoting. And I really liked how I did this like border square on the inside. Originally, it was just the pictures of the birds, and I felt like it was a little flat, and I think adding that little box behind them just helped it look more cohesive, like it was a collection that belonged together. And then I did another one on the back side of the page. Here we go. Now for some of these, I'm actually drawing the logo. And so it's not me trying to be creative with text. It's more I'm just trying to be accurate and write the logo as it is. But I am trying to just experiment with text and try and be different because again, I don't want to just do the same old. I want to try new creative things with this travel journal. So this is a church sermon. We went to church in Dublin at a friend's church. And if you've ever seen any of my church sketch notes, this is basically the style that I do. It's just text and words and images connected with dotted lines and these cloud shapes with lines in the background to kind of help it pop off the page. So if there's any sketchnote style that I'm known for, it's this, and especially with church sermons, which is kind of how I cut my teeth on sketchnoting. It's just the default style that I go back to. And so it's kind of fun to see like my normal style contrasted with me doing new stuff. So we keep on going. And here I'm really starting to embrace different text and sizes and hierarchy. This was my first time traveling in Europe, and I'd never gone on a really long trip. I went for 3 weeks, and I'd never taken that much time off before. And so it was just a huge adventure. And the biggest lesson I learned is that I always have to pee before we get off the plane because there were several airports and countries where you just are not allowed to go to the bathroom until after customs, and you have to wait sometimes a long time. So pro tip for anybody who's not really a well-versed traveler like me. And here, just kind of doing the same thing. Again, I've got the consistent shadow box for each day. And our first day in Oslo was so jam-packed that I felt like there was so much more I really wanted to capture, but again, like there was just so much because we did a biking tour. We saw a ton in a very short amount of time that it was really just highlights. There's actually this woman underneath here, and I was so upset that I ran out of space that I couldn't add her down there. I just missed it. And there was just so much cool history that I just had to really pick what was a true highlight and just trust that I could remember or look it up later. I was also trying to embrace my own experience, not just saying, here's what I saw and here's the stuff we ate and here are the places that we went, but also talking about my experience and me being tired and having to go to the bathroom and staying up late because I'm jet lagged. So I kind of created this little character of myself. I'm usually laying in bed or being angry about something or frustrated. Here we go. Now, I noticed that my handwriting went from all caps to just normal sentence case. Like here, it's just sentence case. And I think that's because I was rushing myself. Normally, I like to write in all caps like here, but it starts to get a little inconsistent. And I think that's just what I do because I was feeling rushed and wanted to write faster. And I feel like writing sentence case is faster than all caps. So some of these I remember doing on the train, and so it's also a little bit more bumpy and the text is a little more messy and a little larger than I would normally write, and it's just because I'm trying to do it on a train because that's when I had time. Another interesting thing is when you start out, so the beginning of the journal, you'll see that this marker is really fine. Like it's thin. There's a lot of thin areas. And then now that we're a week into our trip, it's getting thicker. And that's just kind of a reality of pens like this is they start to get worn and that fine, pristine tip gets worn down and you can't get that super clean line unless you're having a light touch and being really intentional with your marks. And I was also rushing. So that's why it's just kind of an interesting to see like thin, crisp, and then thick and messy. Go. Started still being consistent with those shadow boxes for the day. This was another drawing that took forever. It was a really beautiful waterfall. I took a couple pictures and then found some later online as a reference image. And I really wanted to spend a lot of time on this drawing because it's very complex and detailed, and I just wanted to capture it accurately rather than just like a representative doodle, for lack of a better word. And then kind of same with here, I knew I just did not have the time to accurately illustrate these fjords, and so I did a little bit of a simplified version, and I think it kind of gets the idea across. This is actually a mess up. I was drawing a straight line to do a shadow, and it just looked weird, so I just did some straight lines to show that it was a shadow, but I really don't like how that turned out. I should have just done the shadow with the marker instead of the pen, but here we are. Here's a more simple version of a waterfall. One thing I was trying to do also is draw with perspective. So you'll see some trains and just other drawings back here. I was really trying to improve my perspective drawings. I would take reference photos and then at the end of the day I would look back on my iPhone and kind of use those to draw. So instead of drawing the train straight on or at a side view, I really wanted to capture that perspective and practice that throughout the travel journal. More fun experiences. Now, an illustrator I follow called Mike Lowery has traveled to Norway before, and I was very inspired by his travel sketchbooks, and I kept looking at his work throughout my trip just because I want my sketches to be similar to his. Not exactly like his. It's like I want to steal his style, adapt it, and make it my own, and then integrate it with what I'm already doing. So it was actually really cool to see another illustrator's perspective on the same place and kind of adapt your style and try something new. More experiences. Here's another perspective drawing that I was trying to do. So while we were traveling, one question that I might get often is, when do you have time to do this kind of sketchbook? And like I've been saying, it's usually in the evenings. So we would do all these tourist things during the day, tours, sightseeing, attractions, and we would end by dinner time, like 5 or 6 p.m., and just have the evening off to rest and kind of recharge. And that's when I would do the majority of my sketching. I did keep an Apple Notes app handy, so whenever I thought of something that I wanted to put into the journal, I would write it down so I could remember it later. And then I also took a ton of reference photos, like, oh, I want to put that in my journal. And that way I could remember what things looked like, and I wouldn't have to rely on Google. I could just look at my own photos and draw that. I would say I spent about an hour each day just sketching. And part of that is because I really like spending time on these and doing interesting text and making the drawings look nice. But you can definitely do much simpler drawings and simplified text and smaller areas of notebooks and fewer information. It just kind of depends on how much time you want to spend and how detailed you want your sketchbook to look. So once we left Oslo or Norway, I kind of did a summary page to just remember the things that I had seen and really liked. And then we just keep going back into more experiences. So France was where I was like, okay, we've been traveling for a week. I feel like I already have kind of this like style, this feeling going with my sketchbook. How can I shake this up and make it completely different? And so I decided to do these little comic panels, these squares, and see if I could create my travel sketch journal in panels instead. And so that's why you just see boxes all of a sudden. It's kind of like a cartoon strip where you read from one to the next, and I did the dotted lines so you could follow my flow. And after only one spread, I realized that the boxes was kind of a lot, and I went back to my normal style without the boxes and the comic panels. So it was really fun to try, but ultimately not something that I wanted to adapt or adopt. Here's another church service while we were in France, so that's why it goes back to my typical sketchnoting style. And this was with the U Brands pen, so you'll see it's a lot more fine and not as black too. More sermon. More experiences and things that we did. Now, I actually taught a workshop while we were in France, and it was just like a quick 1 hour how to do visual note taking. And so it was kind of a lightning session. And so I talked about the 5 skills of sketchnoting and some of the basics. And it's like, just, you can't really get good at sketchnoting in 1 hour, but I can at least introduce the idea. So that was kind of a summary of my workshop. Then we're back to experiences. So we were in France for a week to do a creative Christian retreat, and it was really inspiring. Every day we did something new creative. So I taught visual journaling, someone taught pottery, someone taught photography, someone taught writing and poetry and reflection. It was just awesome. And so there were some really great quotes that I wanted to capture. So I did some different writing styles for the quotes. These are some takeaways from the workshop. Then kind of back to just things that we did during the day. Because we were at a farmhouse for an entire week, there wasn't a lot of new experiences and things to capture. It was more like day to day, hey, we had breakfast and then we did a session and then just, just kind of going through your day to day. But it's not as exciting as saying going through different cities every day. Another birds page, kind of adopted that square again. This time I put a shadow on one side. I actually think I like it with just the single line. The shadow is kind of distracting. Clay workshop. Keys & Co. is a restaurant we went to a couple times in the closest city, which is called Caen. It's in northern France in Normandy. We did some outreach work with refugees. It was really incredible. So it's just like sharing my thoughts about that work. More workshops, poetry, kind of documenting what we did and then the output. So after our Atelier week in France, my husband and I went to Paris for a day and did the normal touristy things like the Louvre, Notre Dame. Went out to eat and kind of back to my normal stuff. So here I just did basically a whole journal page because I actually started getting sick in Paris and it was not a good time. I think it was the flu because it happened so quickly. Like we'd been walking around all day and then all of a sudden I just felt like I wanted to die. So just talking about being sick, and honestly, I probably could have done another couple spreads here just about being sick and how I felt, but I was just laying in bed for like a whole day, so nothing really happened. Eventually we went to England. Actually, we landed in Edinburgh and stayed there where nothing happened. I laid in bed for 2 or 3 days, and on our last full day, Joseph and I went to England to go see a kind of a cool area that I'll talk about in just a sec. It's called Holy Island. So here's a town, Berwick-upon-Tweed. We just walked around because I didn't have a ton of energy, so we really couldn't do anything except kind of sit at a cafe, have a coffee or a tea, and then just like walk around, but not like hike, but just like a very slow stroll. And then we took a cab out to Holy Island. So Holy Island is where Brother Aidan started this community called the Northumbria community. And my husband and I have a prayer book from the Northumbria community, and this is where it all started. So it's kind of like a pilgrimage for us to go to this holy island where the prayers that we recite were written. So it was really cool for us to see, even though when Aidan was there, there's like no ruins because it was so long ago. It was still really cool to see all the stuff that had been built on the island since. Just more experiences and journaling, kind of talking about my feedback and what I thought, how I felt, especially because I was sick. And then we started our trip back to the US. Talked about the flight. Now, if I remember correctly, the last thing that I actually captured in my travel journal while we were traveling was, I think, this spread. This was the last spread that I did. And everything after this last page here, this was done once I got home. Again, because I was sick, I felt so awful and terrible that I literally sat in bed for a week and just recovered. And I did this after the fact from, again, my phone notes and my photos. And I didn't remember a ton just because I had sick brain, but I really wanted to make sure I finished my travel journal and completed it before I, forgot stuff. So because I had missed basically 3 or 4 days because of being sick, I have a bunch of blank pages in the back. So before my trip started, I kind of allotted page numbers to days and activities. And as it got closer, I started saying, okay, I only have 20 pages left and we have 4 days. Here's what I'm going to allot to each page. But because I got sick and we didn't end up doing as much, I have some leftover pages at the end. I think it would have been really cool to actually finish the journal for the whole 3-week trip, but it didn't happen, and that's okay. Like I say, white space is not the enemy. Blank pages are not the enemy. It's fine. So to kind of fill up some of the white pages at the end and just keep journaling about our trip, I added these spreads after the fact. So what we did on our flight, just the things that we ate for breakfast, the places that we went. We got stuck in Denver, so just like talking about that. And then trip highlights, just bullet points for each country that we went to and some of my favorite things, the things I bought, and then things that I know I would change next time we traveled. So no trip is perfect, and so I just kind of documented the things that I would do differently or visit next time. So that's my travel journal. And then there's like this cool pocket in the back where I bought a couple stickers and patches and I stuck them back there for safekeeping. This is the travel journal. I'm really proud of how it turned out. It is really fun for me to go back and flip through and remember these things. I'm proud that I tried new things and approaches, and I felt like drawing became easier because I was intentionally practicing it every evening and every time we had free time on a plane or even in the mornings. It was just, I was there to practice and explore and create. And there wasn't really an output. Like, I'm not doing this for a client, I'm doing it for myself. So I felt really free to try new things and express myself. So that's my travel journal. If you have a travel journal, I would love to see it and hear about it. You can ping me on Instagram at Emily A. Mills. And I would also just encourage you, if you're interested in sketchnoting and travel journaling, just take a class. I have a couple free introduction classes on sketchacademy.com. You can check those out below. And I also have a free community for creative people. It's called Sketch Academy Community. I'd love to have you there. It's free. You could sign up at sketchacademy.com.